last week got a lot of people talking about the lobbying contract to the tune of $9 million, essentially to help clear the air on what Nigeria is really doing in terms of security and protecting Christians across the country. But a lot of people did the computation. $9 million, 12 billion naira. Come on. They looked at it and said, is it that money that could be put to good use back home? And also, they imagine that what needs to be done more by the government is ensure better security. As they say, evidence always trounces whatever argument that is out there. So this morning, we're taking a look at the issues and how it also feeds into global politics. Trump about Greenland, Europe coming in and his threats to Europe, Europe speaking back. It's a mess, really, when you look at it. So let's help you basically walk through what exactly is going on in Nigeria and on the global stage. We're joined on the program by Dr. Brian Reuben, International Business Development Consultant, is Executive Chairman of the 16th Council UK, joins us virtually. Dr. Reuben, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's good to have you, Dr. Reuben. Let's get to the heart of the matter, the lobbying contract. It's interesting how things work in the U.S. A lot of things are not hidden. So for a lot of people, they found out from the U.S. and then news trickled in to Nigeria that a certain contract had been given, consummated in December, about mid-December, to sort of launder Nigeria's image before the U.S. And there's been a lot of controversy about it. For you, when you weigh the pros and cons, the cost of it, the opportunity cost, right, and the possible impact. Add to that the editorial by, or the investigation by the New York Times about what the U.S. government relied on to actually authorize the strikes in Nigeria. What do you make of it, particularly weighing all of these factors, Dr. Reuben?
Well, thank you for having me. So what we're seeing here is not a scandal. It's a signal, rather. The Nigerian government is responding to the reality of external perception in Washington. And it is beginning to shape real policy talks, sanctions, security cooperation, and even military posture. That concern is legitimate. But the issue is not whether Nigeria should engage with the United States. Engagement is unavoidable, actually. The issue is how serious states engages under pressure, in this case, Nigeria. When engagement begins with lobbying rather than institutional credibility, it suggests reaction rather than strategy. And in global politics, reaction is expensive and rarely effective. So the sustainable path forward is not louder messaging, but a demonstrable governance capacity. That means evidence, institutions, partnerships, and restraints. Countries that lead with proof don't need persuasion. Their systems speak for them. So this moment should be used, not to trade accusations, but to reset Nigeria's approach to foreign engagement, away from noise towards a credibility-based statecraft.
So the question then will be how effective this will be. How cost-effective is this? If you're spending $9 million on lobbying, again, it could swing either ways. In any case, we've seen the U.S. shut its doors more against Nigeria, almost like it keeps banging the door on Nigeria and other countries. So do you think, as you said, you've mentioned some other factors to consider in this. Do you think it's money well spent? One, do you think the government has been transparent enough to the Nigerian people, understanding that this is not anybody's money, this is our money, right? And if you're going to be spending that huge chunk of Nigeria's money, there must be transparency. Nigerians must know what their money is being used for, especially now that they're being taxed, right? The tax net is being widened. So in terms of handling by this government, has the government done well enough in its handling of its transparency-wise, the use of the funds, and more importantly, protecting the people in question?
Oh, yes. So this question cuts to the heart of public trust. And Nigerians are absolutely right to ask that question. One, on the principle, engaging a lobbying firm is not unusual in international diplomacy. Many countries do it, especially when access to Washington tightens. So the idea itself is not illegitimate. However, cost effectiveness and transparency are where the real issues lie. When you are spending millions of dollars of public funds at a time when Nigerians are being taxed more aggressively, the government owes citizens clarity. What exactly are we paying for? What outcomes are we expecting? What benchmarks define success? So on transparency, the government hasn't done enough. Nigerians learned about these engagements largely through external reporting, not proactive disclosure. And that creates suspicion, whether justified or not. Public funds demands public explanation. So in terms of handling, I will say this. The strategy may be defensible, but the execution and communication have been weak. When citizens are tightening their belts, governments must over-communicate, not under-explain. So ultimately, diplomacy funded by taxpayers must deliver measurable results. That means restored access, improved policy outcomes, and clear strategic wins. Without that, Nigerians are right to question whether this money was well spent.
So let's talk about the deed has been done. I know that from the document that is all over the place, the money's initial $4.5 million was received from the federal government on the 12th of December, 6 months retainer repayment. Now, let me read out some of the scope of the services provided to ask my questions. Consultant services, which is one of the scope. Consultant shall assist the Nigerian government through Asta Legal in communicating its actions to protect Nigerian Christian communities and maintain U.S. support in countering West African jihadist groups and other destabilizing elements. The other part that is of interest to all of us is also the consultant reporting of deliverables, which has to do to provide periodic reports to the clients on all public affairs, government relations, and advocacy services performed under this act. The final report at the end of the contract summarizing all public affairs and activities conducted, outcomes achieved, policy and regulatory shifts observed. It looks like there's clarity as to what the contracting firm and the lobbying firm rather and the Nigerian government are. There are clear deliverables here. But for us as Nigerians, what is the best form of deliverable? Because as Kayode has said, it looks like the more we are trying to make these advances or advancement, the more the doors are shut against us. Or is this just about killing the narrative of there is no Christian genocide in Nigeria?
Well, you are absolutely right. When you look at the documents, the contract itself is actually clear. There are defined scopes: consultancy services, communication strategy, advocacy, and reporting of outcomes. So on paper, this is not a vague agreement. But a critical distinction Nigerians must understand is contractual deliverables are not the same as public interest deliverables. So for the lobbying firm, a deliverable might be reports, meetings held, narrative shaped, or access facilitated. But for Nigerians, who are the real clients here, by the way, the deliverables are far simpler and also far more concrete. Has Nigeria's access to the United States improved? Has our diplomatic standing shifted? Have policy restrictions eased or perceptions changed in measurable ways? So if after 6 months, Nigerians cannot clearly point to outcomes, restored cooperation, softened policy positions, or tangible diplomatic wins, then regardless of how well the paperwork is written, the public will reasonably, question the value. So yes, the contract has clarity. What is missing is public-facing clarity. Nigerians should not have to interpret filings and leak documents to understand how their money is being spent or being used. The government should proactively translate these technical deliverables into real-world results that the citizens, Nigerian citizens, can see and feel.
So even where the contract is clear in its objective, which is to manage the narrative back home, or the perception, rather, abroad that Nigerian Christians are being killed, isn't this a deceitful approach, especially where the Nigerian government had pushed back on the narrative by saying that, look, it's not just Christians are being killed, but both Christians and Muslims are being killed? So isn't it misleading and a failure to manage a reality at home? That's on the one hand. On the other hand, doesn't this expose, a vacuum seen in the absence of, a diplomatic structure in Nigerian missions abroad, a sort of outsourcing of the office of, real-time ambassadors that are supposed to be on ground?
Well, thank you again for that very important question. Now, this is where the issue becomes delicate and, frankly, uncomfortable. The objective of the contract is to manage perception abroad, while the government has publicly rejected or downplayed that same narrative at home. Then, yes, it raises legitimate concerns about consistency and about credibility. Diplomacy is not about framing facts strategically. Or rather, diplomacy is about framing facts strategically. But it must never cross into contradiction. You cannot tell Nigerians one thing and tell Washington something materially different without risking trust on both sides. So, that said, there is an important distinction. Acknowledging that religiously targeted violence exists within a broader insecurity is not the same as endorsing a simplistic or exaggerated narrative of Christians being killed. But the problem arises if messaging abroad selectively amplifies one framing while dismissing, it's at home, domestically. So that inconsistency is what creates the perception of the seats and our engagement itself. And something very important, when you start lobbying to defend the fact that Christians are not being killed, you already have a problem. You see, the focus should be on citizens. You see, whether Muslims or Christians or any other group, they are Nigerian citizens. So that should have been what the narrative should be focusing on and strengthening further. And honestly, I believe that there could have been better approaches, to managing that perception than engaging a U.S. lobbying firm. Strategic communication is legitimate, but strategic contradiction is not.
Right, so this is happening amidst a global issue. Trump and Europe, it looks like the relationship is at a state of severe crisis right now, and you don't know what will happen this week. There's issues around, the Greenland crisis. There's a trade war and the reciprocal tariffs. There's the war as well, and all the negotiations happening. The U.S. negotiating directly with Russia, Vladimir Putin, and then there's NATO right there, and there's concerns around the terms of the agreement. So it looks like the world is at a tipping point right now. Well, we've been at that tipping point for a while, but it looks like we've moved an inch or 2 inches forward right now. And I wonder for you just how long you think all of these agreements will hold, or at least how long you think the world will survive before we enter, God forbid, all-out chaos?
Thank you, thank you. That's, again, a very disturbing situation. And I think that what we are seeing is not a collapse of a global order, it is stress test of it. And you're right, Greenland trade wars, NATO tensions, the US-Russia back channels, all of it happening at once gives a sense of a tipping point. But the truth is, the world has been operating at this age for some time. What's changed, is that the pressure is no longer subtle. It's visible, and it's unapologetic, okay? But the key thing is the key thing to understand is this. Agreements don't collapse overnight. They fray, they stretch, and then they adapt. NATO will not disappear this week. Trade regimes won't implode tomorrow. But the assumptions that held them together for decades are being clearly renegotiated in real time. Now, how long can this hold? As long as institutions are just faster than the shocks hitting them. These are shocks hitting institutions. But the danger is not even conflict. The real danger is miscalculation. So I wouldn't say the world is about to break. I would say we are moving from a rule-based comfort zone into power-managed reality. It's the countries that stay flexible, credible, and strategically disciplined will survive this phase. Those that cling to old assumptions without adapting will struggle.
Well, interesting times we're in right now, and you just wonder how long we can hold as a global family, if I can use that term, because it looks like we're just pulling apart from the center. But Dr. Ruben, we'll have to thank you for your time, at least providing some clarity on some of these major issues as it concerns Nigeria and the global space. I really look forward to return to status quo, but hey, maybe I'm wishing for too much. But we have to thank you, Dr. Brian Ruben, International Business Development Consultant. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.